The sound of rushing water fades in. We see a peaceful hiking trail under a dense Arkansas canopy. Birds call in the distance. Then, a scream echoes through the trees. On July 26th, 2025, in the rolling hills of northwest Arkansas, a family hiking trip turned into a nightmare. By the time help arrived, two devoted parents lay dying on a forest trail, but their two young daughters had been led to safety by the very mother who would never walk out of those woods again. And the man who took their lives, a face no one in the family recognized, but one the state of Arkansas would soon know all too well. If you want more real crime stories like this one, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next case. Devil's Den State Park, Washington County, Arkansas. It's a Saturday morning, just before noon. The July sun filters through layers of oak and hickory leaves, casting broken shadows across a narrow trail. The temperature is pushing 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Humid, but bearable for the Brink family, who had planned this hike for weeks. Clinton Brink, 43, walks at the front. A steady, broad-shouldered man with a love for the outdoors. He's carrying a small pack of water bottles and snacks. Behind him, Kristen Brink, 41, keeps a close watch on their daughters, ages 7 and 9, who are happily skipping over rocks and pointing out squirrels. The park is alive with summer sounds, cicadas buzzing, a distant waterfall, leaves rustling under the faintest breeze. But in less than 30 minutes, this calm will shatter. The Brinks weren't locals to Devil's Den, but they knew it well. Clinton worked in logistics. Kristen was a part-time volunteer at the local library. To their friends, they were the kind of couple you always wanted at your cookout. Warm, funny, generous. The trail they picked that day wasn't especially remote, but it was long enough that you could walk for 10 minutes without seeing another soul. Perfect for a family picnic. No one could have known another man was already somewhere on that same trail, watching. According to investigators, the Brinks first encountered the suspect in a seemingly mundane way, passing him near a bend in the trail. Witnesses later described a young man in his late 20s with short brown hair and wearing a faded gray t-shirt. He didn't make much eye contact. He walked past. But the Brinks would see him again, only minutes later. Somewhere past a narrow wooden footbridge, Clinton paused to take a photo. The girls were playing ahead. It was then that the man they'd passed earlier appeared again, this time running toward them. Investigators say there was no warning, no demand for money, no words exchanged. The man lunged, slashing at Clinton with a knife. Kristen screamed for the girls to run. Witnesses later said you could hear the children crying as they bolted back down the trail. Kristen followed, but only far enough to guide them towards safety. She told them, "Don't stop until you find people." And then she turned back. By the time Kristen reached her husband, Clinton had been stabbed multiple times. He was still fighting, trying to grab the attacker's arm. In that desperate struggle, Kristen threw herself between the two men. It didn't matter. The suspect turned the knife on her. She was stabbed repeatedly, her final moments spent trying to shield the man she loved. When other hikers found them, Clinton was already gone. Kristen was barely conscious. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect didn't linger. He fled through the woods, vanishing into the dense tree line. All that remained at the scene, aside from the bodies, was the weapon, footprints, and something investigators wouldn't discover until later. The suspect's own blood, mixed with that of his victims. By nightfall, word spread across Washington County. A double homicide in Devil's Den. For the first time in years, families in northwest Arkansas were afraid to hike their favorite trails. Police locked down the park. A crime scene team collected every scrap of evidence they could find. Over 500 tips flooded the Washington County Sheriff's Office in the next 48 hours. Some credible, many not. Among them, a small piece of security camera footage from a roadside store just 5 miles from the park. In it, a man matching the suspect's description walked inside, his right hand wrapped in what looked like a blood-stained t-shirt. He bought bandages, but police wouldn't find him there. He had already vanished again, and the trail, at least for the moment, had gone cold. But just when it seemed the killer might slip away forever, one chance encounter in a barbershop would turn this case on its head. Photographs fade in. A couple smiling in front of a campfire, the girls holding marshmallow sticks, all four wearing matching t-shirts from last summer's family trip. Before the world heard their names in connection to a brutal crime, Clinton and Kristen Brink were known simply as Clint and Chris, the couple who always showed up for everyone else. Clinton was the dependable one. Born and raised in Arkansas, he grew up fishing the state's lakes and hiking its trails. Friends described him as quiet until you knew him, a man whose loyalty ran deep. He worked in logistics for a regional shipping company, where his co-workers remembered him as the guy who'd cover your shift without complaint. His job was demanding, but he always made time for family outings, camping trips, sports practices, even impromptu backyard baseball games with the neighborhood kids. He was also the kind of dad who kept a mental inventory of every snack, bandage, and spare pair of socks in his hiking bag, just in case. Kristen's energy was different. She had a way of making people feel seen. A part-time volunteer at the local library, she organized summer reading challenges for kids, often staying late to help a child pick out just one more book. Friends said she was the planner in the marriage, vacations, birthday parties, holiday traditions. She poured herself into all of it. But her biggest joy was motherhood. She loved hiking. Not for the exercise, but for the chance to teach her girls about the natural world. Kristen could identify bird calls, wildflowers, even animal tracks, skills she passed down to her daughters. Together, Clinton and Kristen were a team. They'd been married for 15 years and weathered life's ups and downs with the kind of quiet strength that doesn't make headlines until tragedy forces it to. Their daughters were the center of everything. Saturday hikes were a family ritual, one of the few times they could unplug completely. Devil's Den State Park was a favorite, with its limestone bluffs, waterfalls, and winding trails that could feel like stepping into another world. In the week leading up to July 26, 2025, there was nothing unusual. No threats, no strange encounters. Kristen posted a cheerful Facebook update about their upcoming hike, sharing a photo of the girls packing granola bars and sketchbooks for trailside drawing. Friends liked the post. Some joked they'd be crazy to hike in that summer heat. Kristen replied with a sun emoji and a simple, "Worth it." When news of their deaths broke, it hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a couple living on the edge of danger. They weren't in a risky profession. They were ordinary, decent people in a place everyone thought was safe. Neighbors described them as the perfect example of good parents. Their daughters were polite, happy, and clearly adored. The fact that both children survived because of Kristen's quick thinking and her decision to go back for Clinton made her, in the words of one family friend, a hero twice over. For many Arkansans, the Brinks were a reflection of their own families. That's what made this crime feel so personal. This wasn't gang violence, a drug deal gone wrong, or a domestic dispute. This was a random act of brutality against two parents in broad daylight. The kind of crime you read about happening somewhere else. But it happened here, and it left a void that no court verdict could ever truly fill. The daughters, whose names are withheld for privacy, were placed in the care of relatives. Authorities and counselors moved quickly to shield them from media exposure. But everyone knew that the trauma of that day would shape them for the rest of their lives. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was how quickly police would find their parents' killer. 4 days later, in a barbershop 30 miles away, a 28-year-old man walked in for a haircut, unaware that he was about to walk out in handcuffs. The camera drifts over an aerial view of Devil's Den State Park, rugged limestone bluffs, deep green valleys. A timestamp fades in. July 26th, 2025, 11:38 a.m. The soundtrack is quiet but tense. the low hum of cicadas underlining the heat of the day. That Saturday, the Brink family's hike started like hundreds before it. They entered the park just after 10:30 a.m., parking their SUV in a small lot near the Yellow Rock trailhead. Clinton signed the visitor log in neat handwriting. Kristen adjusted her daughter's sun hats, and they began the climb. The air was thick with humidity. The girls took turns holding their mother's phone to snap photos of wildflowers. The trail wound upward, shaded in parts, open in others. At 11:27 a.m., a park visitor walking the opposite direction noticed the Brinks. She remembered them because of the girls' matching tie-dye t-shirts. What she didn't notice was that someone else had been walking the trail behind her. A young man alone, wearing a faded gray shirt and carrying no backpack. Somewhere around the 1.5-mile mark, the Brinks stopped to rest near a footbridge. The girls knelt by the creek, tossing pebbles into the water. Kristen pulled granola bars from her bag. Clinton scanned the trail ahead. That's when the man in gray appeared. Clinton gave a polite nod. The man didn't respond. He walked past, but slowly, almost lingering. The Brinks didn't think much of it. Strangers cross paths on trails all the time. But investigators would later learn that instead of continuing forward, the man stepped off the trail, waited, and doubled back. At 11:38 a.m., the suspect reappeared, running toward Clinton. Witness statements and forensic evidence suggest the knife was already in his hand. The first blow was fast, aimed at Clinton's side. Shock and adrenaline took over. Clinton fought back, trying to wrestle the weapon away. The struggle carried them off the trail into a patch of low brush. Kristen screamed for the girls to run, her voice so sharp that hikers hundreds of yards away later recalled hearing it. The girls hesitated, terrified. Kristen grabbed them, urging them down the trail. "Don't stop until you see people," she told them. They obeyed, their small legs pumping as they vanished around a bend. Kristen then turned back. This was the moment that would define her final act. She could have kept running, could have hidden, but instead, she went toward danger. By the time Kristen reached them, Clinton was bleeding heavily but still on his feet, pushing against the attacker's chest. She stepped between them, her hands outstretched, shouting at the man to stop. He didn't stop. The knife swung toward her. She raised her arms to block the blows but was struck repeatedly in the torso. Clinton lunged again, but his strength was failing. The suspect then delivered several more rapid strikes before breaking free. Without a word, he turned and sprinted into the forest. At 11:46 a.m., two hikers coming from the opposite direction found the Brinks. Clinton was unresponsive. Kristen was still conscious, gasping for air, trying to speak. One hiker ran to call 911 while the other applied pressure to Kristen's wounds. Paramedics arrived just after noon. Clinton was pronounced dead at the scene. Kristen died minutes later. The girls were found safe about a quarter mile down the trail in the care of another hiking couple who had heard them crying. The crime scene was chaotic but revealing. Blood spatter patterns showed the sequence of the fight. Shoe prints in the mud matched a men's size 11 sneaker. And then there was the most crucial piece: droplets of blood not belonging to either victim. Later DNA analysis would confirm it came from the suspect himself. Cuts to his hands during the attack had left a biological trail he couldn't erase. Witnesses near the trailhead reported seeing a man matching the description jogging toward the parking lot at approximately 12:05 p.m. No vehicle was seen leaving, suggesting he may have cut across service roads and left on foot. By that evening, a bolo, be on the lookout, that was issued for a white male, late 20s, short brown hair, last seen wearing a gray t-shirt, possibly stained with blood. But the manhunt wouldn't last forever. Just 4 days later, a barbershop 30 miles away would become the unlikely setting for a dramatic arrest and the first chilling words from the killer himself. Police drones sweep over the dense forest canopy. Below, yellow crime scene tape flutters in the breeze. The narration begins over the sound of distant thunder hinting at a summer storm rolling in. By early afternoon on July 26th, Devil's Den State Park looked less like a weekend retreat and more like a tactical zone. Uniformed deputies blocked every vehicle from leaving. Search teams scoured trails, parking lots, and service roads. The Washington County Sheriff's Office called in Arkansas State Police and the FBI's Evidence Response Team. The primary goal: recover every possible clue before weather or hikers contaminated the scene. Inside the cordoned-off area, investigators collected the murder weapon, a fixed-blade hunting knife, partially buried under leaves, footprints, men's size 11 sneakers, distinct tread pattern, blood samples. Some matched the victims, but one profile didn't. Witness statements, descriptions of a man in his late 20s with short brown hair, wearing a gray t-shirt. The blood sample that didn't match the victims was the real breakthrough. Testing at the state crime lab would later confirm it belonged to the attacker, who had injured himself during the stabbings. On July 27th, law enforcement held a press conference. The sheriff described the suspect as armed, dangerous, and possibly injured. He urged hikers to stay away from Devil's Den and surrounding trails. That same day, the department's tip line lit up. Within 48 hours, over 500 tips came in, some dead ends, others eerily specific. One tip stood out. A store clerk from a gas station near the park remembered a young man coming in midday Saturday, buying bandages and paying in cash. His right hand was wrapped in a blood-stained t-shirt. Security footage confirmed the sighting, but the man didn't use a vehicle. He left on foot, disappearing toward a rural back road. Detectives pulled surveillance from every business along a 10-mile radius. Piece by piece, they stitched together his movements, leaving the park area, cutting through side streets, stopping briefly outside a laundromat. Then the trail went cold. July 30th, 4 days after the murders, a barber shop in Prairie Grove, Arkansas. A man walked in for a haircut. He had short brown hair, a faint scar on his hand, and seemed oddly tense. The barber, a retired Army veteran, recognized him from the suspect's sketch circulated online. Quietly, the barber texted a friend who worked for the sheriff's office, "I think your guy is in my chair." Within minutes, 2 plainclothes deputies entered. They positioned themselves casually, pretending to browse hair products. As the haircut neared completion, one deputy approached from behind and placed a firm hand on the man's shoulder. "Andrew James McGann," the deputy said, "you're under arrest for the murders of Clinton and Kristen Brink." McGann didn't resist. He simply sighed and muttered, "Yeah, I figured." At the Washington County Sheriff's Office, McGann waived his right to remain silent. Over hours of questioning, he admitted to the killings. The motive, however, was murky. His answers shifted from vague resentment toward strangers to claiming he just lost it. His injuries matched the crime scene blood evidence. His DNA was an exact match. Case closed, at least for investigators. But while police had their suspect, the community wanted something more. Answers. And the legal battle that followed would determine whether Andrew McGann would ever see another day outside of prison walls. The camera pans across the Washington County Courthouse. News vans line the street. Reporters cluster on the courthouse steps as the sound of clicking shutters fills the air. On August 14th, 2025, just 19 days after the murders, Andrew James McGann was led into court for his first public appearance. Dressed in an orange jail uniform, his right hand still bandaged from the wounds sustained during the attack, McGann showed no visible emotion. Prosecutors charged him with 2 counts of capital murder. In Arkansas, that's the most severe charge available, and it carries the possibility of the death penalty. When asked for his plea, McGann simply said, "Not guilty." From the outset, Washington County prosecutors made their intentions clear. This would be a death penalty case. Their reasoning was straightforward. 2 victims. Premeditated attack, based on the suspect doubling back, to confront the Brinks. Vulnerability of the victims. Kristen was unarmed, attempting to protect her children. Randomness of the act, which amplified community fear. They presented early evidence to the court. DNA from the crime scene, confirmed to be McGann's. Surveillance footage from the gas station, showing him buying bandages shortly after the murders. Witness statements placing him at the scene and along the escape route. McGann's court-appointed defense attorneys hinted they would explore mental health factors. They suggested he had no clear motive, framing the killings as an explosive, irrational act rather than a calculated one. However, Arkansas law is strict. Mental illness alone does not excuse criminal responsibility unless the defendant can prove he was unable to understand the wrongfulness of his actions. The Brink family filled the first rows of the gallery, wearing pins with photos of Clinton and Kristen. Supporters from their church and community were present at nearly every hearing. The daughters were not in court. Relatives shielded them from the proceedings, but their presence was felt in every victim impact statement read by prosecutors. A slow montage of flowers, cards, and children's drawings piled outside the Brink family's home. Handwritten notes read, "You are loved and heroes forever." In the days following McGann's arrest, Washington County grieved together. Vigils were held at local parks and churches. Hundreds of people, many of whom had never met the Brinks, stood shoulder to shoulder holding candles as the sun set over the Arkansas hills. At one service, a pastor read a statement from the Brink family. Clinton and Kristen lived and died protecting what they loved most, their girls. They were our heroes, and now they are the girls' guardian angels. The Brink daughters remained in the care of close relatives. Counselors specialized in child trauma worked with them privately. Authorities and family friends emphasized the need for stability and normalcy, routines that could help rebuild a sense of safety. While their names have not been made public, their story has quietly influenced policy discussions about victim services for children in Arkansas. In the wake of the murders, Devil's Den State Park implemented visible security upgrades, increased ranger patrols on weekends, emergency call boxes installed on popular trails, trail cameras placed at key intersections to log visitor movement. While park rangers stressed that violent crime in the park was rare, they acknowledged that this case fundamentally changed how locals viewed outdoor safety. As of late August 2025, McGann remained in custody without bond, awaiting trial. Prosecutors continued to signal their intention to seek the death penalty. The Brink family attended every hearing, their quiet presence in the courtroom a constant reminder of what was at stake. Even before the trial began, the state of Arkansas versus Andrew James McGann case was already being taught in regional law enforcement training programs. It was cited as an example of rapid suspect identification through community cooperation, the evidentiary value of mixed DNA at a crime scene, the importance of securing surveillance footage within hours, not days. To those who knew them, Clinton and Kristen will always be remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. Friends describe them as partners in every sense. In marriage, in parenting, and in life's small joys. Their final moments weren't defined by fear, but by courage. Clinton fighting to the end, Kristen turning back to protect the man she loved. As the anniversary of the murders approaches, community members plan to dedicate a small memorial along the Yellow Rock Trail, a bench overlooking the valley where the Brinks last walked together. The inscription will read, "In memory of Clinton and Kristen Brink, who taught us that love is the greatest act of bravery." Do you think justice will truly be served in this case? And should the death penalty be the outcome? Let me know what you think in the comments.